In movies, photography, and art in general, light plays a massive part in not only illuminating a subject, but setting a tone or an atmosphere. And in miniature painting, we use paint to replicate and manipulate the idea of the abundance of light and the absence of light. But sometimes it can be a hard thing to understand and an even harder thing to try and explain. Which is why we're going to do two things in this video. One, we're going to cover blending because of course we are. And two, we're going to try and use that idea of manipulating paint and color to represent a metallic surface. Yeah, this is another non-metallic metal video. Except this go around, every single time we step up in brightness, we're going to be changing the color. That way you'll be able to see every single layer and how it builds up from a shadow to a spectral highlight. So yeah, it's going to get a little weird. Step 1, we're going to be laying down a base tone. Now this would typically be your shadow. And even though this is quite bright, remember the shadows don't always have to be the deepest, darkest color you can get your hand on. As long as there is a massive tonal difference for contrast between a shadow, a midtone, and a highlight, it's very, very workable. From here, we're going to start sketching in our very first highlight. Here's where two ideas come into play. One, light placement, and that's going to dictate where we start painting. If the light is slightly above and to the right, that's where we paint. And two, the shape. This is going to control how much of a section we cover in paint. But before we go into that, here's our blending idea. Because there's a fairly strong jump between our purple and our blue, what we're going to do is create a 50-50 mix. Now 50-50 is a color halfway between the two other colors. It's essentially going to create a half step. And because it is halfway between those two colors, it's going to start to diffuse the hard layer lines that we get. So it would make sense that when we start painting this, it's going to be right on the edge of those two layers. And you are definitely going to cover up a little bit of each side. As far as consistency goes, this is pretty thin. It's not down to a glaze, but it's thin enough to be that little bit transparent. So as we work across that hard layer line, we're going to start feathering out on either side. And then after that, if you want, you can come back in with a glaze and then feather out that transition into the previous color. Here, I'm going over the transition color with the original shadow, which was the Diabolic Plum. Because we're changing colors so often, this model isn't really going to have a midtone as we generally understand what a midtone is. If you don't know, a midtone is basically the color that we're trying to represent the model as. But because I'm actively looking to show you each and every step in each and every layer, it's just what it is. As far as blending placement and ideas, we're going to be repeating those exact same steps every single time. And if we were using the same hue and only stepping up in brightness, this is already where people will start to come undone with understanding what's going on. But that's why we're using such big tonal jumps, and you can already start to see from putting the third color in here where all of those layers are actually working. But because there is such a big visual jump not only in brightness but also in color, this is going to help us to start figuring out how we actually blend. Theoretically, blending is pretty easy. We're just trying to diffuse, blur, or create a transition. And in a lot of videos, that's exactly where they'll leave it. There is actually a lot of back and forward work when it comes to blending. It's very rarely you set it up, you blend it back once and it's done. Even though we're working up to Turquoise Siren, you can already see that we've had to work backwards into some of our original colors. This will happen a lot. Yeah, I'm going to be keeping this shot through the entire video. It's somewhere between Zordon from Power Rangers, Alpha, Readers Escape, recruit a team of teenagers with attitude, and like the Bohemian Rhapsody film clip. Scaramouche, Scaramouche, will you do the fandango? Let's just ignore that and go into the green. Here's where something cool actually happens. There's not much difference when it comes to the difference between Emerald Forest and Turquoise Siren, at least when it comes to the brightness. Obviously they're different colors, but their light intensity is almost the same. If you take all the hue and saturation out of this, it will look like you're painting the same color. See, there is no brightness advantage here. So if there's no advantage, why are we even using it? Well, we're not painting in black and white, we're using color, and since we are using colors, this is going to be a transition into the highlight. But its usefulness is actually to bring out something I call luminosity.
You merely adopted the dark. I was born to it, molded by it. I didn't see the light till I was already a man.
On the bright side, that was better than the Bohemian Rhapsody bit. Luminosity, as far as my spicy brain perceives it, is adding a glow or some kind of warmth without actually changing the intensity of the brightness itself. While it doesn't add anything to the volumetric side of highlighting, it does bring forward an atmosphere. And as far as the actual color goes, it's a nice little transition to hit that green between the blue and the yellow. Because green is exactly what happens when you mix blue and yellow. The Moonbeam Yellow that I'm using here again isn't much of an actual jump in brightness. There is a little bit, but I'm actually relying on the saturation to step in and be our spectral highlights. If you didn't know already, I am a member of the Army Painter Factory team, and that's how I got this sweet ass box full of 7 shades of brown. And as much as I get some perks from them, you do too. Head to the Army Painter web store and use the code HERESY5 for a sweet discount. And if you're in Australia, you can use that same HERESY5 code at in-games. Then you can pick up your own box of brown. Who comes up with this shit? Alright, I'm not going to go over the colours or the technique because we literally just did that for the last 5 minutes. Instead, we're going to talk about the actual idea of non-metallic metal. A lot of people try to give you the key to non-metallic metal as a singular technique. And yes, I suppose as far as actual application of paint goes, it can all be packaged up in a little bow just like that. However, what really sells the non-metallic metal feel or effect for me is that one piece being surrounded by other pieces of the same material. Which is why generally when I paint non-metallic metal, I do focus on a section, but it's a section and not a single part. In the first part of the video while we were painting the torso, I was also doing the little abdomen flaps as well, and that's so I actually had a couple of different pieces that I could use as reference against themselves to know that I had all the light and the placements in the places that they actually had to be where they make sense together. Volumetric highlighting and non-metallic metal rely heavily on the inference of light. And when it all comes together, there's your effect. Because we've changed colour every single layer, this is a fairly intense looking colour scheme, so we're going to have to try and continue that around the rest of the model. Let's have a look at the chainmail skirt. And while we're there, we may as well look at a different kind of blending. Chainmail is kind of a pain in the ass for a lot of people. It's hundreds if not thousands of individual pieces that become a single material. And that can be a little bit tricky of an idea to understand how to paint. For this one, I'm going to use the same colours in the same order, but the technique's going to change a little bit. And the easiest way to explain it is probably calling it overbrushing. It's kind of like dry brushing, but there is a little bit more paint on the bristles. And for this one specifically, I'm only going to be depositing that paint with downstrokes. And because there is so little paint on the brush, you are going to run out quickly, which means every single stroke is going to become thinner and more transparent. Think kind of like a dry glaze. So it's actually going to feather and blend itself out with not too much effort. Alright, we did the armor, we did the skirt. We're going to have to do the cloak the same. At this point, it'd be rude not to. So let's have a look at a different way of blending. Again. We're using the same bunch of colors and now it has to represent a different material again. So yeah, we're back to wet blending. Non-metallic metal, wet blending, and ridiculous colors choices are kind of the backbone of this channel. But just like when we're doing the half-step layering technique for the armor, wet blending with these kind of colors is going to show us the exact same thing. How they all actually work together. Again, this is showing where all the actual layers sit. And it's a lot easier to see how they come together when we're using different colors and not just jumping up in brightness. Wet blending as a technique is literally just mixing paint. That's the bare basics, but what we're actually trying to do is use it to set a gradient. If you want a deeper dive on wet blending, check out the video we did last week on Hornet from Hollow Knight Silksong. We cover what to do with wet blending, but more importantly, what not to do. And if you do check it out, just enjoy it. That thing got copyrighted to the shithouse. Because sometimes humor and just having a good time is more important than money. Before we get to the glory shots, I just wanted to have one more floating head in the darkness moment. I kind of look bald. And actually, while we're here, I should probably tell you there's links in the description for a Patreon, the Army Painter, in-games, and like merch. And if you feel like we've earned it, maybe hit that subscribe button. While the educational aspects of this model are helpful, it just looks pretty fucking cool. And at the end of the day, that's all that really matters here. But if you've been wondering all that time what would happen if we were using normal colors, well, this is it. Same volumes, same ideas. The only question is, which one do you prefer? As always, a massive thank you to In-Games, the Army Painter, and the best Patreon members in the world. Big love, you filthy heretics.